ago. I need to change the way the algorithm is iterating through the path that exists, looking for cells that it can use. And I think this is, accept to prove path. So what I was trying to do was find the first cell that had an open area next to it, and what I really need to do is grab them in pairs every time. So because this was going to become troublesome. So I'm going to put this here, even though I may move one or both of these into the loop in a moment. But get current is going to be the same until I move it. Alright. So I'm doing a test on the start cell. Once I've got the start cell, I only have to test it once. After that, I just need to test the finish cell. I know I put this in, I took it out, and I put one back in. I think this may go away again. So what I'm looking for is the F cell. Really, I need this. I think I started with something like this. Flip-flopping code is not the ideal way to go through these things. And because of this, these probably need to go back inside. Okay, so at this point I've got a start cell and a finish cell which are adjacent, and both of them are in range. So basically, without trying to read through this just yet, I know that what I need to do is they need to both have an open area. I don't necessarily know if it's the same open area, but they need to have one. Too many things on my desk. One moment. Need to get the path, which may come back with a non-response. It may return invalid or empty path. at this point, because I've drawn a path, or tried to get a path, it's going to use the same algorithm I did before, which means any cell that it touched or looked at, whether it's part of the path or not, has now been marked as traveled. So I need to reset everything. Need to increment the start and finish, and go back and do this again. And the most important thing is, as soon as it does that, if the finish has gone past the available cells, actually this isn't even doing that, this is just looking to see if it's gone past the table. What I need to know is if well, it will do this. What I need to know is if it's returning -1, that means that I'm outside of the list. I've gotten to the end of the list. But -1 will return as an invalid cell. So it's actually not going to get to the... It's not going through this in any particular order. But as soon as it gets to the end of the list, it should return a -1. And that will force it to exit the while loop. So I think this is what I need. Now, whether or not these parts do this or not, I'm not sure yet. Find open adjacent. I already wrote a function for that. So that's what I need for these. So find open adjacent. Okay, it's not giving me a path, it's just giving me either a cell index or a -1. So what I need is to get the 2 cells adjacent to at least find, this will just find an open cell. It returns the first one it finds, so it's not going to comprehensively go through everything. It just goes through until it finds one. So it's possible it may miss a path option. It's not perfect, but I'm not looking for something. Hello, I'm not looking for something that's going to fill in the entire thing. I'm running an algorithm. I'll show you just a moment here. One moment for a brief history of this piece of code. There's a bunch of different games in here. The intent is to use C++ and DirectX, and that's, I had to use DirectX to get all of this stuff to go, so I'm using C++ because that's what I want to work on, practice. And right now I'm working on this one right here. It's called mouse path. So these are like pre-generated puzzles that already existed. I just coded them in. And the goal is to go from a start point to a finish point, touching every cell, which isn't a red block, one time and one time only. You pass through a cell, but you can't go back. But you have to hit all of them. And so you have to work out things like the only way to get in and out of that one is that way, and here, and the only way to get out of the start is that way. And you work this until you have one continuous path that goes through the whole thing. The problem is these are all statically pre-made puzzles. And so what I'm doing right now is trying to write an algorithm that will generate a puzzle like this from nothing. So instead of having, I think right now I've got 12 or 13 of these things that were already made, and of various difficulties. 15 of them. No, that's not the right number. That's the size. More than that. I got 19 of them. But there are various difficulties. Some of them are really simplistic. There's one of them in here that's just really way too easy. This one's pretty easy. like this. There's really only one, well, most of them only have one path, one solution, but this one is really easy because for the most part it's just one winding path. There's a little bit of a deviation here, but that's not too hard to figure out. Same as here. Another one here. There's these little small one-offs where it has to make a turn to capture the other cells on the path. So what I'm trying to do is write something that will generate a puzzle in which you that uses most of the board. It's not mostly blocked off with bricks, but isn't this simple. Now, making something this simple is hard to tell. I don't have any easy way to check that. So what I'm doing is just trying to make it generate a puzzle which is more complex. And so what it does right now, it can generate a board. It generates a start and a finish point, which actually I think this is the start and that's the finish. It finds a path that got there. It's fairly complex, but it does leave a lot of space unused, like all of this space out here is not used. And so what I'm trying to do right now is do a second iteration through this path to identify large areas that aren't being used and see if I can make a path that, or expand the path to cover some of that. So in this particular case, like most of these small areas down here are small enough that I don't have to worry about them. This is a pretty big area right here. So what I wanted to do is, as it follows this path through here, is to see that there's a big area here and try to generate a path extension that uses up some of this. That's the idea. So I'm working from the point where I've already got a path that goes across the board. I start at the beginning of the path, and I take one cell next to it, the very next step on the path. And right now it is doing here it's grabbing the two cells, randomly grabbing an open cell next to each segment of the path. I need to make sure that that both of these are valid. If it returns to -1, it did not find an open cell. So now I need to generate a new path. A new path object, an instance of the path. Which is a list. So I create a new, oh, it's got to be a pointer. I think, is there a way I can do this? Yeah, I'm not adding this to anything. I can do this without. I think if using it this way is going to cause any trouble. I think this will still work. I get so accustomed to working with pointers for everything that when I stop using pointers, things start working strangely. Sometimes they don't do what I expect them to do. Okay, so I've created it. Now I need to populate temp path. Okay, this is going to be a problem because the function to create the path only populates one static path, and this is where I am going to have to make this a pointer. So the function that generates the path gets a start to finish, but it's assuming that it's all going into the same path variable, and this time it's not. Recursive path generation. Okay, so this is already called, so this generated the board, an empty board. It's called the recursive path generation based on random start and finish points. But this populates test board and test board only. So what I need to do is change recursive path, recursive generate path, so that it will accept a path to be populated. Alright, so if I do this, then up here, I need to tell it that test path is my test path that it's supposed to populate. But here, let's call this again. But here, I'm going to call temp path, and I'm going to give it the path start. Start path is not actually on the current path, it's one cell adjacent, but was just determined to be valid. And same with finish. And these two may not actually link. They could possibly be in separate areas that there is no way to draw a path between them. That's possible. Recursive generate path. Doesn't return anything. Okay, so this should then generate a path between those two cells, if it can. Get first, get last. I need to check those. I'm using get first or get last for anything. In this particular case, get current doesn't return the cell in the list, or the element of the list. It returns the value contained in that element. Get first and get last, though, I do need to return just a pointer to the cell, or the element of the list. So I need to go look at the list. Current get first is just a pointer to the cell, so that's good. To the element. I keep calling it cell. Okay, so So it's more complicated. I need to make sure that they're not... They can't be null pointer, either of them. If either of them is null, because it's a list, if either of them is null pointer, the list is empty. So I don't have to check both of them for null pointer. So I can check one to make sure it's not a null pointer. I do want to make sure that last is not first. So it's not empty, and they are not the same. And that would mean I have a path with at least two elements in it. Path segment. So, in which case, and I have not gotten to test the insert path yet. I think it was all written up though. Oh, I don't have it here. I don't think I just skipped it. I'm pretty sure I wrote it. I just, yeah, it's written up. I just haven't used it yet. So, and then I gotta figure out how to remove the list from, which is a function for this, to remove the path from temp path without deleting the elements. So insert path wants, it wants a list and pointers to my current cells. I'm not capturing pointers to the current, I have to hold those as well. I don't have any way of taking the index and moving it backwards right now, and I'm not going to add that. So, at this point, now let's grab the parameter list. So, I need these. My mouse path list is temp path, that's the one being inserted. The point at which it's being inserted is based on 2 points in test path, and those are these points. So what I need is, I wish it didn't do that. Oops, this is the wrong place. I need that when I grab this. Not helping. Okay. This is where I get into not having great variable names. I don't generally use P for pointer, but I may do that. Okay, then I got another trick. there's no function within the list to return a pointer to a cell except for the start and finish. I need to add another function for the list to be able to get a pointer for current. So in addition to get current, it's going to be confusing because these are actually pointers. This is going to break some things, but it will be more consistent. It's not even a value, it's more of an index. This is going to break a bunch of things in the list and things that call the list, as I frequently do. Alright, so all the functions that are, all the places that call these are now broken. Like here. Which is my insert. Yeah, that should be fine. So in mouse path, now I've got a whole bunch of errors all revolving around this. Of test path. Yeah, test. Get pointer. Okay, so now I've captured the pointer along with the index for each of the cells that are branching, potentially branching to generate a new segment. Okay, so now I can enter the pointer for the start cell. finish cell. And this should then take this whole path and link this cell to the start, both directions, and this cell to the finish, both directions. Eventually it's a double linked list, but I really wasn't sure I was going to need both directions, and so far I don't think I'm using either. I'm not using it backward. It only goes forward. I don't know yet if that's going to change later. So it creates a recursive path. If it came back with a valid path, it inserts that at the point where it was checking for possibility. Before I need to do this, this integer is not just yes or no. It's not just Boolean. It's supposed to return a count of how many open cells there are at that location. And so I wanted to use this to determine whether it was a big enough area to be worth doing. And I could probably use that to make sure that S-path and F-path are the same value. If they're not, then I'm not even looking at the same area. They can't ever connect, so I can stop then. It's always possible, of course, that there could be two areas with the same number of cells in them, and they're not going to connect, but they would have the same value. It's possible. But I wanted to have a check in here. So minimum cell size. It needs to be an integer, but I'm going to have to, it's going to be some division, so we're going to have some floats in here. I was thinking I was going to measure those. I need this to be some arbitrary. So I don't need to divide anything. I just need to pick some percentage of this. That's completely arbitrary. So if it's, so a minimum cell size is 25% of the total. So if it's a quarter of the board, that's enough to try. I may reduce that, because just under a quarter of the board is an awful lot of board to be covered with bricks. So this is kind of arbitrary, and I may change this. But it means that here, in addition to checking those, S path needs to be equal to F path. Because if they're not, I'm looking at a different area. If they are equal, may still not connect, but at least it's possible that I'm looking at the same area. And if they're the same, it doesn't matter which one I check then. Cell size. So this can actually be declared. I don't need to do this here. I don't need to redeclare this each time I loop through. It's really not cell size. It's well, I guess that's good enough. Alright, so this just got a lot more complicated, but the steps in here are the same. Then I need to reset board, and I have a function to reset board. I just got to make sure it actually works for this process as well. I did not make a function to reset the board. I just ran this. This isn't what I want. That's not the right one. This is clearing all the walls. Don't want to do that. Recursive generate path. We generated the path. I logged the path. I add the path to test board. I think this is doing line operations. It's broken as well. This should not be pointer, this should be index. And that should be index. Okay, so just adding all the line operations is really all this is doing. So somewhere in here it was clearing the board. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I just never did this. I've got some more errors down here. I'll go fix these. So get current index. Can't type for beans. think these are older chunks of code that I don't need anymore. This has been wrapped up in the apart. This is following an algorithm that I was trying to write 2 days ago, and I think most of this is obsolete. Yeah, that's all old. Okay, so I don't see where I was clearing the traveled, and I was sure I had done that. Perhaps not. It does that when I reset, making it a board. That's when it does that. Okay, so what I need then, rather than write another function for this, although I may, because I've got a number of different resets going on, and I may encapsulate those into one function and maybe pass it flags, like, well, it has to get reset this time. Alright, so that resets all the traveled spaces so that they're available for the next temp path. Temp path here, I need to remove all of the elements without deleting anything, and that would be, I think, release list. Because I don't want any of the cells deleted, they've been added to this one. It now owns them. Get current pointer. Oh, I need this. Release lists. Yeah, it just clears out all the pointers so that there's all the cells are lost. So this could be very dangerous if I hadn't already passed these off to another list. So if I do that, and temp path is done. And on the next try, it can generate another temp path. So temp path, if this worked, it created a bunch of cells. Oh, actually, I need to. This needs to come out of there because I need to delete it whether or not it had a path in it or not. The object has to go away. Reset the board. Why? Why you always default to something that I'm not using? It's not C, it's S, that's why I can't get it. S, so my start is now the finish cell. If, for some reason, the previous pair of start and finish actually managed to make a path extension, then the F cell that I'm now picking as a start cell is probably out of options. It's probably done. But who knows? Maybe it has another play. I wanted. It's path. So get a new F cell. Oh, I have to grab the other part as well. So S. Need to move the pointers. So capture that. So my old finish is now the new start, and then the very next cell is my new finish. And then it will loop back up here. If all of these values are still valid, we can go again, except that I haven't redetermined F path and S path. So I need to do this a second time. Nope, it's not. It comes back up. It's a while loop. It comes back to the while loop, not the if. So it comes back up to here. Make sure that the F cell is still within the array. And did not return a -1, which is telling it there's no them at the end of the list. Regenerates path count for each cell and runs through this again. Alright, there's only a dozen places where this could go wrong. So I'm going to go back and start logging some things. This will keep going every time it iterates through the loop. Do I need these for anything? Okay, so it's going to mark when I found an area to do. Okay, so where's the recursive path? Recursive path is not painting, it's not going to log a board each time. I do log the test board when it's done. So what I want to do here is I want to log the test board each time it tries to insert an extension. Okay, so S is the start position for logging, so it puts an asterisk at this point. So probably the best point to use for that is going to be S cell. And it's going to clear the board. Increment and try again. Okay, and this is all from a previous attempt and not necessary. And this is not necessary. This was I was just testing the count function to make sure it worked. Alright, so all sorts of things can go wrong. Start with, it might not even build. We'll find out. Alright, let's get my log file. Okay, it froze. It's not good. Alright, so it was trying to do a lot of improvements. So it generated this board. It's not painting anything on the screen because it's stuck in a loop and won't return control back to Windows. So it wouldn't paint anything on the screen, it just froze. But it generated a board that looked like this. So these are the cells that it moved through, not necessarily part of the path, but it went through all these cells to get from the start to the finish. Then it tried to do path improvements. Still trying path improvements. Okay, so there's some checks that I didn't add to the... Yeah, so there's a problem. It's going to hit a problem right off the bat, because if, and I can't tell what the path is right now, but if all of these cells were the path, then as soon as it moves out between the start and the next one, there's no adjacent cells. It should just keep moving, though, if there's no adjacent cells. The issue is going to be if there's two cells that don't actually connect, because I don't think I'm checking for that. So if it picks two adjacent, like start in the next cell, and then from those randomly picks an adjacent cell that has empty space, which is what it's looking for, and that empty space happens to be the same size it's possible that it still can't connect a path between the two. And I'm not actually checking that here. So when I do this, before I do an insert, I need to make sure it actually got to the finish point. I don't know that that was the only failure. And that couldn't have been, because it actually never logged that it found an area. It never found an area, and it kept trying improvements. It logged this a lot. Which means this was never true. Ah, this is the problem. Okay, so the section where it increments through to move on doesn't happen unless it found a valid path, and that was an error. This set needs to happen regardless. So if it doesn't find anything valid, it can move on to the next cells and try again. And it wasn't doing that, so it was stuck on the first set. But I didn't have enough in my log to tell me which set it was working on or what index, because I opted not to make it log any indices. Alright, let's try this again. 2 errors fixed. Is that enough? Something. Okay, it made a path. Trying to see if this looks like pretty much what I got. Unfortunately, this is showing me the path plus all of these down cells. Anything that's a down cell, including the path, shows up as a plus. So what I'm looking for, are there any more down cells? Actually, this is what should have extended. This was the initial plan, or I can scroll down. It never found an improvement, is what it's saying. It iterated through the entire path and couldn't find a single place where it could improve it. And there was lots of room here. This is probably less than 25% of the board, but this should have been plenty of space. I need more logging. I think there's another error in here. F path and S path were initially booleans just to see if there were open adjacent cells next to the current cells. I changed it to an integer so it could tell me how many were there so I could count them. But what I'm not getting is an index to the cell that's being checked. And I need that to do the path extension. I need to keep a track of a separate variable for each of these. The problem is that I could misuse pointer size or something like that to get two values back. I don't want to build my own structure for this. So I'm capturing the count of these, but I'm not capturing what the cell was, and I think I'm using it as though it's a cell index later on, like here. And these are counts of how many cells, which could be the same, which is complete garbage. I can't use that. I could do it in 2 steps. Oh, these are, oops. These are indices. Count. I feel like calling this? I don't remember seeing that in a log. From... Yeah, I don't think this is being used. Available cells. Count cells recursive. Oh, there's another problem. Yeah, this is another error. So, count cells recursive. Double cells. Who's calling this? That's what I want to know. Nothing is calling that. That's interesting. What if this is something I started writing and abandoned? But it introduces another problem, because this was, although this may not actually be being used, but it does introduce the problem of counting the recursive cells, which is going to screw up the later part. Recursive generate path. Because it's flagging them as traveled. I need to put some more clears. And open adjacent. Okay, so I am doing this all wrong here. Count recursive cells is the one I commented out. The one time it was calling it, I commented it out or deleted it. I'm using all of these functions incorrectly. So these are actually doing, to some extent, what I want to do now, but not what I thought they were doing. So find open adjacent is literally just finding an index to a cell which is open, which is what I was just trying to set up. Come on, mouse, stop it. Okay, so I don't need that. Find open adjacent is actually returning an index, not the count. The count available is getting the count recursively, it calls the recursive, for that index. But the only place this was ever being used is one that I deleted because it was for a task and I didn't think it was being used anymore. If I had better comments in here, this would not be as confusing. It'd still be confusing, but not as bad. Working without a plan here, or a script. This is why you should always have a plan. You don't necessarily have a script to do coding, but have a plan. Have it organized beforehand. Alright, so I've misused a bunch of numbers here. So all this is doing is confirming that I actually have an open cell. At least one open cell, and it's returning an index to the open cell it found. Basically, the first one it found. And so so if path is really going to be greater than 0. No, it's going to be greater than -1 because I'm looking for an index, not a count. I keep confusing myself with this. If path is greater than -1, I screwed something else up here. Okay, so they have open adjacent cells. Now I need to get the count of how many cells. And that's going to be this one. So the start has an area that size. Finish has an area of this size. And so I want to know that the indexes are both valid, but I've already checked that here. So I know I've got 2 valid indices for open cells. I can check now that they're not the same. Or that they are the size. Okay, that's a different issue. So, sort of confusing variables here. So these 2 were already checked. These need to be the counts. So I want to make sure the counts are the same. So it gives me a better shot that I'm looking at the same area. And that the count is above my threshold, arbitrary. Found an area of and now I'm giving it the indices. And issuing the path. The rest of this should be okay. Alright. Horrible, horrible mistakes there. In large part because I didn't have a plan, and because I made some drastic changes and then reworked the way I wanted to do it right before I stopped 2 days ago. And then just totally forgot it all because I took a day off, so. Forgot everything. Terrible mistakes. Okay. Got a board. So the problem is that it's hard to tell from this whether this is the initial path or whether it's actually improved the path. So what I want to do is look at well, this took a while. It must have done a lot of exploring down in this area because I'm getting a lot of dead ends, but there's nothing, it's not marked on here. Oh, I still haven't reset I have to reset the board some more. I haven't done that. Turning from recursion. Okay, this is the initial, yeah, it went over the entire, almost the entire board trying to get from start to finish the first time. It covered all of this area. Start and finish, they've got adjacent cells, it tries. Start and finish have adjacent cells. Set 532 traveled. So it came into here, this one here, moved up, its marking was traveled, it's marking off this little area in here is traveled. So what it did was it's weird. So it's possible that, like down here, when it started with these, it could have picked opposite directions between this one and the adjacent cell, or even if they went the same direction and then just took a random path that it couldn't get there. Although it should have been able to connect eventually. It would have recursively just backed out of steps until it did connect. So it should have been able to find an alternate path from here to here. And it doesn't appear to have done that or tried. Although that could have been anywhere in this segment, but it didn't do it. It didn't try until it got into here. And based on where it started with this cell, it could have been at this first bend here, so it may have picked these 2 points, possibly. So it draws a path north, goes east, went north again, has to return, then it goes south. It recurses south until it got to here. Fortunately, I don't know what the finish point is for this particular iteration. It's only showing to me the start and finish for the entire board. Maybe I need to make it paint the local, print out the local start and finish. I do suspect, though, every time it calculates the size of an area, so if I pick a cell here and tell it to count the size, it has to recursively iterate through all of these cells out here, counting them. And when it's done, they're all marked as traveled. And what I need to do is, whenever it does that, I need to reset them all back to untraveled. Because otherwise, the very next check can't do anything. Okay, so this wasn't actually trying to find a path, this was just counting the cells. And so it found that there were 11 cells. Yeah, there are 11 cells in this area. And then it did clear it, so maybe the count already does that. We'll go confirm that, but it got cleared again. And it went to the next cell, so this started here now. So again, this sort of looks like what it did was it tried to count cells from here, and then to count cells from here. So it started at this point and went through all these cells, and it started from here and it's going through, which is what it's supposed to do. And so it should go through and give me another count of 11 again. And that's where it stopped. So it figured out that there were 11 from 2 different points, but did not add this to the path. And it didn't try to do anything with this down here. And it never actually logged a message saying that it was trying to add any, or insert. Yeah. So this is working. It's getting its recursive cell count. Give me the right count. And then it's painting both of those. They're printing them both in the log. This is working. So if the start count is equal to the finish count, which they were, they both came out 11, and the S count is greater than minimum cell size, in which case they won't be because it was a very small area. At which point it was going to give up and go further. So let's go look at the recursion here. I want to see if it's actually, is this where it's clearing things? Does it recursive count? Prints the count. It clears it every time it tries to do a count. Okay, that's fine. That works. But when it's done doing the count, I need a function to clear travel. I just keep having to keep adding this back in. I have to keep putting this function everywhere. And I need more of them, and they need to be generic enough to work between any path I give it. Or any board. Yeah, I have to do this differently. Alright, that should do it. So every time, really, oh sure, I copied that. So it's a test board. So every time I count cells, I want to reset the traveled. Every time I do a generate path, which is going to be called a couple of places in here, recursive generate path. It's already actually been completely cleared at this point to generate the initial path. So before I try doing an attempt to improve, I could clear it, but it's actually the first thing it's going to do is try to find out if there's open adjacents, which actually will be a problem if it's already traveled. I think that's where it's failing, because in that previous example, the bottom half of the board was never used, and then when it came back to try and make an improvement, it skipped it. And I think it was because it had already been marked as traveled in an attempt to find the first path. So I need to do that. So I reset the traveled so it can find these. Then every time it goes to count the available cells, it's going to do its own reset. And when that's done, before I call this recursive generate path, I have to do this again, and I'm missing a step where I have to mark the start point as traveled before calling the recursive, as was done here. So I'm not going to test start, I'm going from this path. So it'll mark its start point. So everything on the board that already has a path is already marked as traveled. I'm now marking the start point of my new path, which is just one off from the current. I start the recursive path, which is going to mark more of them. And then before it iterates through again, it's going to clear it again. It's doing a lot of clearing. Luckily, it goes quickly. All right. It didn't fill in everything, but it filled in a lot. It's possible it did this on the first try, so let's go look and see, did we get any improvements? I'm already at the bottom of the log. Dead ends. This is actually not a bad puzzle. I haven't tried to play it, but it looks reasonable. Okay, returns. Prints it out, starts to try and improve. Yeah, so okay, what this looks like is this was the first attempt. It didn't actually do any improvements. This is probably of all the first attempts that I've gotten, this is probably the best one that's come out so far. But that doesn't really address the issue of trying to make the improvements work. Alright, so I'm going to back out of this to make it restart the log. Otherwise the log just keeps... We'll have multiple puzzles on it. Oh god. Okay, so it traveled the entire board trying to fill in this. And it's just going up and down the side. Because it's all path improvement at this point. Yep. Okay, so path improvement's not random, even though it probably should be. It's using the same function for trying to find a path, so it should be randomized. It's just not. Okay, this is a terrible example, and it's one of the worst ever. I went from one of the best to one of the worst. Okay, it's a little better. Okay, so this appears to be the end. This looks similar to what I've got. Try to do a path improvement. They have open adjacent cells of 0 and 0. That doesn't make sense. And then it gave up. Okay, right, because these aren't indexes. These have to be... This is an error, so if it finds that there's no path, then it's going ahead and trying it. This has to be greater than 0. Both of them. No, this is not right. Those were correct. Those are indexes. In this particular search, this is not randomized. This is why it was going up and down the side of the board. It just goes in order, northeast, southwest, trying to find something until it finds one, which forces it to go north, all the way east, all the way south, and then as soon as it went one cell west, it could go north again. So I understood that behavior. Maybe not the best, but that's only for the finding an open adjacent. It shouldn't have been doing that during the recursion, so I've got a bad call in here somewhere. So I gave it 2 indexes. It went to check those indexes. It returned with, there are no open adjacent cells at the indexes that I got. Although it said that there were. Because, it's pinning this before I've checked. So I have to have both of those before I say that I have open adjacent cells. But regardless, it was getting in here and then telling me that the start area based on this location. Oh, it's not checking it again. It was... Okay, so but find open adjacent should not have returned anything unless there was at least one open cell. So this should always be at least one. It might not meet the threshold, but there should have been at least one. So I check the cells within the array. I get a point object, point structure from my index. It goes to check north. If north is not traveled, which means it's open, then that's my cell. It checks east, south, and west. So actually it should go west. It should go in opposite order here, west, south, east, north, because the last thing that flagged as valid is the one that's going to return. Which is fine. The order is arbitrary. So in each case, it only assigns cell a value besides -1 if there's at least one, because it's not doing a count, it's just checking the first cell. So the first cell in that direction is open, and that's the cell that got returned. This was working so well. So when I find open adjacent, there is at least one. There's the start cell. Start cell. Yeah. So this is on the path. So S path is an index to the open cell adjacent. And if I do a count available cells, count available cells is maybe not counting the first cell. It's possible. So I get a cell index. I reset the traveled. Mark path as traveled. Reset traveled is not doing the path thing, which it should. Reset traveled. Reset traveled I really only need for the test. And it needs to include this bit. Because that's important as well. Alright, so I don't need these extra variables now. Don't need any of this garbage. I don't even need that. Okay, so now it's going to clear the board and unclear the path, which is this. So it does a start and a finish, and then everything on the path. Which is an error because the path was being cleared. Okay, so I reset the traveled and do my count. I do my count. Before I call the recursive count, just like I did for the main. So if the cell that I'm checking is not traveled, first thing I have to do is make it traveled. and increment count. And then there's another error. Count plus equal. So it marks the start cell, so I can't run over it again. It counts the start cell, and then it calls recursive count. Count recursive. Starts with no count. If I have a valid index, then my count is 1. Recursive counts plus equal. There's a lot of errors in here. Okay, so I think that should improve the counting. Recursive generate path is fine. Seems to be. Okay, attempt to improve path. Reset the traveled. Just checking their open areas. So I should get better numbers now instead of getting those 0 zeros. Let's try this again.